The summer is nearing the end of her season, and we're all starting to feel the nip of autumn in the air. We have many simultaneous projects in motion that need to be wrapped up before winter sets in, that it can all feel as if we're racing towards a weather-induced finish line. The Canada geese tell us that it'll be an early winter, so it behooves us to focus on our many renovation and landscaping projects, for which we'll share our progress and our punts with you here.
So we never did a spring tour, so I thought we could do a summer tour. We just got really busy, and I think what you'll see in this tour, I'll swap out between me and Sonder, but you'll see that there's lots of projects and lots of unfinished projects, or lots of projects in motion actually. So one thing that has really come together, and we'll do a video tour on this Pollinator Garden, it's looking so floriferous and so robust right now, which would totally shock me because in May it was so close to the ground. There were some things blooming, but not quite a lot. But again, it's almost approaching 1 year of this garden, and I can't be happier. I mean, it just looks so beautiful, and we've had so many pollinators come and visit. They usually come when the sun is like at its zenith. That's when you see the majority of the pollinators, but I even looked outside the window this morning and there was a ruby-throated hummingbird that was visiting some of the flowers here. So the other thing that is looking a little weedy, but this is actually going to get shaped up. Part of the reason why this is looking weedy is that we're actually in the process of taking up some of these old bricks here. So you can see back here, we've taken up quite a bit of bricks already. Those red flags are a yellow's jacket's nest. So don't get too close, but I just marked those off so that nobody actually steps in that area of our garden, or our lawn. So this whole walkway, bricks are going to be recycled, so that's why they're over there on the pallets. And you see these large slabs of stones, which are just such beautiful colors. I mean, they have this ferrous tone, like rusty colors, and some grays and blue hues. And we imagine just very large walking stones with very thin kind of gravel in between. Maybe we'll interplant it with some of the kind of creeping thyme. So that's a big project, and I think that we'll get it done hopefully before the snow. That's why we're actually like removing it now, is to prepare the bed. And then this will be less weedy then, because we'll take out the grass and the other plants that are around here, and then we'll just edge the bed with the stone and the gravel. And same thing through here. I kind of planted this Roman chamomile, and it's started to edge into the herb bed, which is fine because actually this is all chamomile too. So this bed doesn't look like much. It kind of just tossed a bunch of the herbs in here that I want to see. This pyrus went in here because it started to look a little bedraggled. I don't know if Pyrus japonica, I mean, obviously it's a not native. I don't think it's actually going to work well here, so we might have to shovel prune it, as my friend Lee says. And then this is like a contorted hazelnut, so this will actually get a little larger, and my idea is to just plant a bunch of herbs around here And then as they start to increase, kind of move them into the meadow. But I come out here and I actually use the herbs, and some of them are still small. So I had planted this very late in the season. Oh yes, and we had some tomatoes that we just kind of plopped in there. So this bed definitely didn't get as much attention as it deserved, but we wanted to get it planted before the end of the year. So these are other plants that are just starting to get planted. We got them earlier in the season. Many of them are bare root, and the idea is to actually plant them out towards that direction, although I did plant some yesterday in the forest. And then we got some real specimen plants like this white pine that has become Saunders' favorite, but we still haven't planted that up yet. But I reminded everyone that we'd need to get these planted before the fall is out, and actually this is a really good time to plant. Knowing that these were bare root, I actually stuck them all in soil. So these tulip trees and everything I recently divided, and I took some of the tulip trees and I actually planted them in our forest over there. These white spruce I haven't divided yet, but you could see that I just like plopped them into the soil because I knew early on that we weren't going to be able to plant them. So hopefully that hasn't like really eliminated their potential of being healthy trees, but we just didn't get around to doing it. I kind of bit off more than I could chew on that side. So this garden is a shade garden, as you recall, and as you could see, it's like kind of half and half. This side has a lot more plants in it because we planted this really early on, and then this has yet to spread out. And actually where this little food place was for the chipmunk, that's where that Pyrrhus japonica was, but it wasn't really doing as well. After the springtime, it just wasn't doing really well. So I just kind of took it out and put it in the herb bed. And my hope is that next year, all of this will actually spread out really nicely and look a bit more dense like this. Because when you're using this type of plant, these types of plants as ground covers, you're not really fighting weeds so much. So errant dandelions, grasses, things along those lines. And there has been some traipsing through here. You can see that there's been little walkways because Sonder will talk later also about, he's working on the side of the house, and we're going to be repainting the side of the house, and that's been definitely some trials and tribulations with that as well. So let's take a walk through. This is one of the other gardens that will get a new border when we start to put the walkway through here. And you may remember I did an episode on this. These were some acid-loving plants. And I'm very pleased. Again, they were relatively small plants and they've really spread out. I mean, this Prunus pumila var depressa, start to see it's getting some of the droops on it, the little berries. And then we have these Aronia melanocarpas. So those are those low-growing plants. And then we have some of our Galtharia procumbens. And then we have our Cornus canadensis in here, and some of our Lonicera crassifolia and Vaccinium vitis. Idea, there's lots of plants. And even the thymes have spread out quite nicely. And I loved how this thyme was spreading out. So you can see I have some small little plugs of thyme that I've spread throughout here. So hopefully next year you'll see just a carpet of thyme with a carpet of other plants. So it's all low-growing species that will complement, I think, hopefully this rhododendron. Now this, unfinished, because we're not quite sure whether we're going to extend the deck out yet or how we're going to do that. So you kind of see works in progress that are here. So again, this is another weedy bed. And I think what we'll do is I'd like to turn this more into a gravelly area. So if we could extend some of the walkway and then slowly feather it out into the lawn, and then have the walkway come through here and have this a little bit more gravelly, because this garden is going to be mainly catmints and hyssops and also lavenders. So they're plants that don't require a lot of water. They can handle being in kind of gravel beds, and they were just planted this year, but you can see how weedy the bed is. But I know that, we're just going to properly finish this hopefully this year. Hopefully next week we could actually get started on it, but we'll see. It's not oh, there goes our Canada geese.
See you later.
They're stopping on their way south. Just a few days ago they started all flying south, so we know that it's going to be an early winter. One more thing before I let this off for Sonder. This is our low-mow lawn. It's looking very lush, very green. I love how thin-leaved some of these native grasses are. They did get compressed though. You'll see that some got killed or dying back because we had to do some work on the house, which Sonder will talk about, and we had to drive a very large wheeled vehicle across our low-mow lawn. So hopefully it'll bounce back.
Yeah, so as you saw in the background, while Summer was explaining more about the gardens, is that our house looks half apart. We just finished setting new windows in the house, and we're currently working on painting everything. So right now, everything is like prepped for paint. First, we wanted to stain the house and use like a stain versus a paint. But then we slowly came to the realization that if we want to stain this house, we first need to get rid of the old stain, which is very difficult because this is multiple layers and the wood has kind of cracked over time and hasn't been kept up, especially on the south side where it really gets beat with the sun. So I tried sanding this down as much as I could, maybe with like an angle grinder or just a belt sander or even like all kinds of sanding equipment. But it's very time consuming and it leaves the wood like all gouged out. So it's not gonna be an even surface anymore. And then we stained some of it, and then the wood that was bare became really matte and had no sheen to it. And then where we went over the old stain, it showed very shiny, meaning that the stain didn't really pull into the wood. So after a lot of trial and error, we just decided to just paint over the whole thing. And that's what we're doing now. We're just lightly sanding it, just getting rid of some of the peeling paint. I even see some more here. So, and then we're filling all the holes with some caulk, and then we're gonna just paint over all of it. And the paint has a little bit of a shine to it, which is actually quite nice. And one thing about the stain that was hard is, and you can see that actually, yeah, let's go to this side, because you can see after a lot of foot traffic and rain, this is supposed to be like a really nice chocolatey brown, like you see here. But then just from stepping on it, it just gets really dirty quickly. Like it just attracts a lot of dirt. And it honestly doesn't look that great. So we were kind of like, okay, it's a lot of work sanding down the whole house and then putting something on it that you don't really end up liking is kind of, it defeats the purpose of doing it. So now we got a paint that looks very similar to the stain. So these two boards are the stain, and you can see that it turned out really shiny on this side. But then here on the edge where it got sanded down to bare wood, you can see that it's not glossy at all. It's very matte. And then here we have our paint, and this is just the color. It's not the actual paint, it's just a color sample, but you can see that the colors are very similar. And we'll still get a little bit of that wood texture, but it's not gonna be like wood grain. And we were kind of after that wood grain. But trying to sand down this entire house, which is over 1,000 square feet of surface, it's just gonna take forever. So we're in the process of painting. We got some mold growth here, so I gotta sand all that down and make sure I prep that properly before I paint over it. But that's what we're doing with the paint. And I'm also painting like outlets, like a nice black accent color, just like to match the windows. Now that we're going with paint, I guess we just have to upkeep it. As soon as we see cracks, we could just either like lightly sand it and paint over it again. It's just really important to upkeep it, because the longer you let it go, the more work it's gonna be to keep it nice. And areas like this on the south side, they definitely got hit harder. This got hit so hard that we just had to take the whole siding off, because there was, it was all cracked, and here you could see some of the old boards. I mean, I could paint over this, but it's just better to replace it, because something like this, that's not good, even if I paint over this. So it used to look like that, nice orange, but yeah, those days are gone. I am saving these boards. I'm taking these boards down. Those were cracked, so I couldn't use those. But the rest that I got out of this, I got quite a big pile of cedar wood out of it. And what I do is I run them through the planer after I take all the nails out. And I may end up with 1/2 inch nice cedar boards that I can trim the edges off, and then I can use that in all kinds of projects. Because like, the only thing that went bad on this piece of wood is really just the top surface. So with a little bit of work, you can get rid of the cupping by planing it. But it turns out to be looking like a brand new board once you do that. And one of the biggest tasks that we got done with just now is setting these windows.
Oh my goodness.
That was one of the biggest energy, careful behind you, there's a pressure washer. One of the biggest things and issues in this house is that it's great, it has all these windows. Like, there's so many windows in this house. But then at the same time in the winter, it's a nightmare because there's so much air just leaking through it, because they were really inefficient and they were 30 years old. The seals had been broken of the double glass. There's all kinds of gaps on the side of the window. So we knew that one of the biggest projects would be replacing the windows. And we happened to find this brand of windows called Alpen, and they have a window called the Tyrol series. And they're triple pane windows, fiberglass and plastic combined. And they're not top of the line windows, but they are very good as far as energy performance goes. And they will last a long time because they did use fiberglass, and it's not just PVC, because PVC will expand and contract and warp and twist and whatever, especially on the south side of this house, that could be an issue. So yeah, we got this window, but then these windows are also very big. They're like almost 5 by 5 foot. And they say that per window, it's like 10 to 12 pounds per square foot. So then if you have 5 by 5, that's 25 square foot times 10 or 12. That's like, you're almost at 300 pounds per window. And then especially the doors that you saw on that side, those are even heavier. So
4 people.
Yes. So with 4 people, we were able to lift this thing in place and set it. And they've been quite easy to install. They have these nailing flanges, even the doors have them, just to help you kind of get it in and hold it down in place. And I mean, they're cool doors. I still have to adjust some of the hinges and make sure that the weather strips are like touching properly. But you could see that you can easily open it. And then this door also opens. So you have this kind of like we can open up both sides of this building here and really let a lot of airflow through.
Do you want to talk about the screens and why they have like white strips?
Yes, so the reason why we have these white strips on them is because that birds don't know what glass is. And birds will think that, oh, there's a tree over there, let me fly over to it. They'll go at it and then they'll hit the glass, and then sometimes they actually die in one hit. So we, for now, put this mesh tape on it. This is for drywall, or in the bathroom for if you work with Durarock, which is a cement board. If you want to tape the joints and make sure that the stucco or the mud kind of sticks in here, that's what you have these for. But they make perfect temporary, bird protectors. So we put those all over the windows because eventually we're going to get screens, just like you could see there. Or actually, let's walk to the kitchen window because that's a great example of it. Just to give you an example, we put this window in, and 2 hours later, there was a bird that just like hit their head, and like some of the food that it just ate was like spread out over the, like, it was just horrible. So eventually what we want to do is put screens on everything like this, and it will compromise the view a little bit from the inside, and it will provide some extra shade on the inside, but there's kind of until we find a better solution for preventing birds from hitting these windows, we're just going to go with screens because they're cheap, they're easy to replace, and you could potentially take them off. You know, if you really wanted to, you could like take them down. But it's for now, it's the best way to go, because unless we have some kind of smart sensing equipment to detect if a bird comes and then try to detract it with like something moving, or whatever technology that we need in order to prevent birds from flying into windows. Until then, we're just gonna have screens on them. So we're gonna make screens for the fixed windows as well, and then that hopefully prevents them from flying into it.
Can you talk about this window and how it opens?
Yeah, sure. So these are tilt and turn windows. So one of the things that allows us to make screens on the outside is because they open inwards. You can see that these are tilted now, but they also turn and open like a normal window, but they open towards the inside.
Yeah, it's a more European style.
Yeah, and they have bird-safe glass, but from my understanding is that the bird-safe glass is still not 100% guaranteed that they won't fly into it, because they use UV patterns. And I'm not sure if the birds are actually...
Twice as expensive.
And the big down part is that it's really expensive to have that. And another thing we've done is that we've changed a lot of the operable windows to just fixed windows, like there on the front, because it gets rid of a lot of the obstructions as far as you know, the extra framing that you need to have in order to have operable windows. And the window is like half the price, because now it's a fixed window instead of all the mechanical parts that come with it. And you know, setting these was quite easy. We could kind of just lift them in place here, but then for the windows that were up high, this was really a head scratcher. So what we end up doing, and what I believe is the best method to do it, is to just rent a boom lift, and that can handle like 1,000 pound, and just set them on the edge, like make a little platform, set them on the edge of the boom lift bucket, and just kind of crane over there, and then just lift them in the last couple inches. So that's what we end up doing.
And that's why our grass has been compressed.
Yeah, and the problem is with such a heavy machine is that you have to drive it on the lawn in order to get it close to the building. So some of the grass will be compressed, and hopefully that will restore itself over time. But there would just be no way that I could set these top two windows with ladders or anything, because you're not going to take 3,000 pounds or 300 pounds up a ladder with two guys in order to, you know, with the window.
And they didn't just like fit in there. Sometimes you just had to.
Yeah, you measure them to make sure that they're going in. But the tricky part about these ones was that they have an angle at the top. So what that means is that you have to kind of wedge it in there between these two beams that are sticking out. So, you know, the way that this worked is that we actually didn't have a space in the bottom here to leave extra space at the top. Because this is under an overhang, it doesn't really matter to have like a bit of an air gap in the bottom. But that gave us some extra space at the top there. And that way we were able to kind of just lift them in from the bottom and then slide them up and then set them in. So it was really tricky to fit them between the beams because of this angle that they have. Not just the one in the top, but also the one that's on this plane with these beams kind of sticking out towards it and away from it. So the deck, first my thought was, well, you know what, these boards, they might have some life in them left. Let's just sand everything down and paint it, or stain it. But the problem we quickly realized is that staining is gonna be every 2 to 3 year thing. If you're working on a deck, it's probably going to look like shit, because as you've seen, the stain just turns gray.
And we just painted that.
And we just painted that last season. It already looks like this.
Yeah.
It looks like crap. So we quickly realized that probably composite decking is the way to go, because then it's just going to stay as is for like at least 50 years is the warranty. and then, you know, maybe it will last even 100 years, so you don't have to do anything about it. So we're probably gonna replace this with composite decking. We have some gripes with it because it doesn't look real. So we got tons of samples, and there are actually a couple boards that are convincingly, you know, look like actual deck boards. And at that point, I'm also like, well, if it's a composite deck, why does it have to mimic wood? It could just be its own kind of thing. But we found something now that kind of looks like Ipe hardwood. Yeah. So it has that kind of texture and color. And we're going with a little bit more red in the deck than the house because it will complement the two colors. If everything was just brown, then it would be too much. What's nice about it is that we actually keep the existing structure. Like the structure underneath here doesn't show any rot. So we could just keep this, and what we're actually gonna add is flashing, meaning that we're gonna put tape like this on top of these beams, and that will preserve its life. And they'll stay open on the bottom because they don't get a lot of water damage from there. And I'm also thinking of making a gutter system around the perimeter of it to capture some of the water and snow that melts, and that can then get dragged away from the house so it doesn't just sit there near the foundation. Now another issue with painting this is that we have all these screws and nails popping up. So some of these will have screws, some of them will have nails. It's very inconsistent and random because I imagine that over time they just kind of fixed stuff. And you could see how bad it is. You could see nails here. And what's great about this is that, you know, this is a lot of wood. It's like 1,000 square feet of deck. And what I think we can do is, most of these boards are fine if you flip them over. So I'm thinking again, like, take all the nails out. I have a special tool for that with the air gun that kind of shoots the nail out and removes it. So you could do that quite quickly. And I might just throw it through a planer. Get an old planer and just throw it all through it. And then you have pretty good boards. I mean, these boards are an inch thick, so you have quite some, you know, wood left. Here's two boards I sanded down. It's been weathered quite a bit, so you can see they're in quite good shape, except for some of this cracking going on. But I imagine we can still get a lot of wood out of this, and that we can use for all kinds of garden structures, because it's basically pressure-treated wood. So we can build little sheds with it and everything. So it's gonna be a great resource. I'm constantly trying to think of how I can use the materials that we rip out in other places. And for example, the windows that we took out of this building are gonna be installed in the big barn that we have down there. So there's hopefully zero to little waste that we have, although you will have waste because there's just some of this stuff.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
It's inevitable. And you know, at that point you're starting to look at, well, can this decompose? You know, but then probably not because it has stain on it. So, or if it's pressure treated. So, you know, in this case, this is not pressure treated. So this could be composable or decomposable if we take the stain off. So, you know, I might end up, and then the nails that you all rip out, like I have a whole bucket of nails here. You know, all this, eventually you have a whole bucket full of these, and those could be melted down and brought to the scrap recycling center. So there's all kinds of ways that I'm trying to figure out how we can reuse the materials that we have here. And it is a little bit of extra work to think about all of it, and it's a lot of work to prep all these boards, take the nails out, but at the end of the day, it's less work dealing with the trash, and you end up with a lot more resources. Like we'll have all this wood that we can build stuff with, and that would be great. So that's the update on the house. And this stuff is the stuff that really needs to get done before the winter, and that's why it's kind of prioritized, because if we don't fix this before the winter, it's just gonna be a terrible winter where we have a less energy efficient house, and you know, the stain on the house has to take one more big hit from the winter. And with some new paint on it, hopefully we'll do a lot better.
So the reason why we're bringing you down here is that we actually had a very dry year. So the pond is actually surprisingly low. That, and it seems like there's a little bit more algae growth in it. So we're wondering whether our grass carp has passed or not, because he's getting up there in years. But the other reason why I'm bringing you down here is because we started to plant along the interstitials and along the riparian areas. You could see this one's a lobelia. There's a couple lobelias that are coming up, cardinal flowers, and then you see the forget-me-nots right here. And a lot of this is like a really natural border and a natural edge, which is great because we want to keep it that way. You'll see lots of grass-leaved goldenrods, some Canada goldenrods. This is Eupatorium perfoliatum. This is a bone set. And then, unfortunately, it's not in bloom. But yesterday, this hibiscus, Sander looked out and he wasn't wearing his glasses and he goes, "What is that red out there?" And it looked like a piece of clothing. It was so bright red. And there'll be more blooms coming because you could see how floriferous that actually looks. But it was like full on, large flowered, bright red, the kind that you almost have to squint your eyes at. So that's really wonderful. We're getting our native hibiscus here as well that we'll be planting, because I learned that that's actually a specialist pollinator plant. And so I've been really having fun interspersing some even more native plants that I hadn't identified or seen around this, half lake area. So that's really wonderful. We are working on our community garden area, but we're not going to show that to you. Decided we're not going to show that to you because that is a work in progress and we want to be able to do a reveal for it. But let's walk up here and we'll show you some of the other gardens that we've been working on. Actually, right here over to the left, this is going to have to get mowed back very soon because we will be putting some bulbs in this area. This is one of the areas that we couldn't actually put bulbs because the tractor can't go on a slope. So when we were planting those 70,000 bulbs, we were hoping that the tractor could go over here, but it couldn't. So we have to mow this back, and probably in October or so, maybe mid-October, we'll be doing some bulb planting in here. This area I just recently kind of sheared back. We have some vitex here, which we actually saw when we were touring the Hortus Garden. That's in the Ulster County. We have our peach tree. There was one peach on it, but I think it probably fell off and somebody probably ate it.
Look at this thing, is all like falling.
Yeah, so this is our Rose of Sharon, and half of it had broken off, and I wasn't sure if that was from the winter, but this part over here that you see is actually dead. So you'll see that it kind of split in the middle and then started to fall down. So half of it was in bloom this year, half was not. So what we really need to do is come in there and probably cut this down and just kind of survey in there. You can see there's some goldenrod kind of moving in. So I got around to really keeping up this bed, and you'll see that when we first planted it, it didn't have that much in it. I love how this is starting to spread out. It's a very large bed, so it's going to take quite a bit of time for it to spread out. I love, love, love how this woolly thyme has started to spread. You can see I just started to do some smaller interspersed plantings here, so eventually over time this whole thing will be woolly thyme, but that's going to take quite some time for the woolly thyme to move out. The sedums looking great. And when you step back from this, it almost looks like coral. Just this colorful, like light blues and red purples. And I love that tonality to this bed, especially because that that fir up here and that maple. I really wanted to take off those color cues and the structure of these plants and bring that down on a smaller level below. And I think between the penstemons, which you can see are really dark-leaved, and the sedums over here that are dark-leaved, that really kind of brings in that color of the Acer palmatum. So I'm going to start planting more low-growing plants. The plant that I really like the best here is this Artemisia. A lot of Artemisias grow tall, but this is called silver mound, and it actually grows just about that height, maybe a little taller if it starts to flower. The flowers are relatively insignificant though, and you can actually go and cut them off if need be. But I ended up planting more of that because I just really loved the look of it. And then this area is a bit more wild. And I wanted to plant that area a little more wild so that it provided more privacy for the birds in the bird bath. The one plant that I'm surprised did not show up here is my sage, which is called Windwalker sage. It's a really beautiful red sage. And I was surprised it actually didn't show up. Or if it didn't show up, it didn't flower this year. But, and then I started working on this bed. You can see that this is a non-native grass actually, but it has this nice beautiful purple structure. And again, almost kind of like our Muhlenbergia. It gets that really beautiful purple haze so you could see through it. But this is another large bed. We started to shape it a bit more, but it needs a lot of work. And I'm just literally just chipping away at it. And then this is just such a weedy mess. This was one of those projects I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna get to it this year. I'm not going to get to it this year. This is crazy weedy. And basically, this is what this bed used to look like, essentially. So we got somewhat control of this bed, but as soon as you cast your eyes over here, it's a very, very weedy mess. So this is going to be a big project, and it's probably just gonna be punted until, we'll probably mow it back, but this will just be punted to 2023. So that's just, it's just one of those things where you shake your head at and you're like, one little thing at a time. This one is one of our native grasses. You could see it has this really beautiful, again, that purple red inflorescence. Now, this was one of the panicum cultivars that's supposed to have red leaves, but I don't know why this one decided not to have red leaves. You could come over here and you could see that these over here have the red leaf. And then this, again, this bed was kind of like everything that we had found in the meadow when we were cleaning out the meadow, and we just kind of piled it in here. So eventually we'll probably come in here and really treat this bed nicely, but it's been one of those beds that has not been, it's not like the pollinator bed or some of the front garden, the shade garden bed, or even that bed that we just showed you. It hasn't been taken care of as well because we don't quite know what to do with it yet. So we're slowly chipping away at it. Here is the orchard. I'm just starting to line the beds again with wood chips. And we have to come in here and actually mow. You can see that the clover has gotten pretty high. The generalist pollinators though love this area. I mean, there's tons of clover. But we'll just mow this back, and you could see on that bed over there, we actually relayed some of the wood chips and put some more cardboard down. But
yeah, all the garden landscape stuff has kind of been pushed off to next year because of all the building.
Yeah, the building has really taken up quite a bit. But you'll see that we ended up planting still quite a bit in here. I started to take a lot of the spreading herbs here. So this is Pycnanthemum muticum. This is one of those mountain mints. These spread pretty quickly. So you could see even something like this, these little rhizomes will come spreading out. Like any mint, it will like spread. And this is how I'm kind of treating some of the orchard guilds. I'm starting to plant some more of our strawberries, some more of our herbs throughout here within the fruit trees and the fruit bushes. You could see that we haven't had much of a yield of strawberries this year because we've been kind of clipping them back so that we could get more fruits next year. But you could see they're starting to spread pretty wildly, you know, throughout here. I mean, we've planted about maybe 300 to 400 different types of strawberries, so it's quite crazy. And then we have some of our currants and everything are running service berries. And yeah, we'll see how things actually pan out. You can see some of our squash. We did kind of plop in a few squash. When I went away for a week, we had a ton that we ended up picking, some that were a little bit too large for my liking, but you'll see that's kind of growing in there. And then we have some of our nitrogen fixing plants. So I think this is Baptisia australis. And then we have some of our mints and bergamots here and things along those lines. So I'm sure this will just fill out next year quite well. And then you'll start to see the semblance of a meadow. Did we plant all this? No, not at all. This was some of the seed that was in the seed bank. One of the most prolific plants in this particular area is Daucus carota, and this is a wild carrot. It is actually edible, it is a medicinal, it is non-native, and it has spread pretty wildly here. I went and actually planted some plugs as well. So you'll see that these are some helianthus plugs, some pycnanthemum plugs. You'll see some of this Daucus carota coming in here again as well. So the plugs have been doing pretty well, and some of the seeds that have come up this year are the sunflowers and the lupin and some of the retivita. But we'll do a proper meadow update down the line, probably later in the fall, because honestly, it's gonna just be too much for this summer tour. And I want to actually talk about where we are with the chicken coop.
Toilets are a great indication of us renovating something. There's like a toilet outside of every building almost here right now. There was a bathroom in here, and it wasn't really properly put in. It's kind of nasty. I bought this camera on a wire that we can inspect what's down there, but there is a pipe going down, but there shouldn't be a septic system here. So I wonder if they just dug a hole and just let it go, or it was a little bit of a makeshift situation here. But this building is quite in good shape. So what we're gonna do with this section of the building, this actually used to be an office. So they insulated it, and it's just a square building, and it's actually 2x6 framing, which means you can fit quite a bunch of insulation in there. But there's just a couple things that need to be done in this building to get it up to good working condition again. So the first thing is the floor. So we ripped the entire floor out, and they were basically just linoleum tiles glued to the concrete. So we're probably just gonna go over this with vinyl LVP flooring.
Because it's the chicken coop.
This is a chicken coop.
Temporary bedroom chicken
It's like the cheapest, we got the cheapest flooring we could find that looks decent. It was on sale.
$1.
So $1 a square foot. And yeah, so what I've done here is obviously we put clay on the walls to make it look nice. This was kind of our test area to see if we wanted to go with this kind of clay for the Meadow House. Then another thing I did is I ripped some of the drywall off here at the bottom because there was quite a lot of moisture that just kind of soaked up in here and soaked up into the drywall. But surprisingly, there was very little mold or rot. So I didn't have to do much. I put a sealer on the bottom plate here to prevent air from getting in from underneath in between the wood and the concrete. And then we're gonna put a baseboard on here that also kind of seals that bottom. So that's what we're doing in here. This is that bathroom area. That is gonna be a storage closet. And it's very dark in here, but one thing that you could notice is that once we started taking off the drywall, it was just disgusting, like black mold everywhere, mice and chipmunks and squirrels that gotten in here. And we'll show photos, but it's, it was completely destroyed from that corner out. And the reason why is because they wanted to vent the plumbing that they had in here. So they just punched a hole in the metal roof, and that just allowed all this water to come in. and basically just slowly over time just drip into this cavity and just start to rot out all this stuff down here. Now it's looking a lot better now because we let it dry out for a while, but even that hole plus some of the holes for the AC, they were just like entrances for rodents, and they just got in here and made a big nest. You could see a piece of insulation here. There's just mouse poop all over it, and some of the insulation was all like tunneled through. So a lot of that had to get removed. So what we did is we removed all that stuff. I sealed everything. I closed all the holes. I put steel wool in, and now we're just gonna put new insulation in it, put drywall on it, and then seal it back up, and it will just be a normal closet. And then this building should be good to go.
Yeah, so I hope that we're gonna be finished with this before the winter comes. And eventually we'll start working on the outside of the building, but for now.
Yeah, so this will be a extra bedroom space for now. And then once you get chickens, it'll be a chicken coop. But it is a nice building, so might as well use it for a while to just, here, I'll show you that vent pipe that came out. So yeah, this pipe was just literally like sticking out of the roof. It got broken, but it wasn't really done properly to begin with. So yeah, that's this little building. It's a good little building. It has electric potentially. It has no water, so you know it's good for a chicken coop, but that's about it. Oh yeah, and we installed these raised beds to grow some asparagus in.
Yeah.
So this whole area used to be an overgrown mess with, you know, old nursery equipment, just metal pipes sticking out of the ground, with tons of old roots from honeysuckle and multiflora rose, like big roots that were just cut off back in the day. And what we did to this area is we first just string trimmed everything, like get the grass out of here. And then what we did is we took all those big roots out, all the metal pipes out, and we would just walk in here, but we would think we had them all, and then we would stumble over another root that you found, then we'll pop a flag in it so we know, oh, we got to come back to this one and take it out. So we took out, let's walk through here. We took out a lot of this here. There might still be, oh no, this is a pink flag, meaning that there's something planted there. We took some of these bigger trees out because there were quite a lot of them. So then we started to kind of figure out different zones here and start to mow certain areas, and other areas made them more like gardens. And what we did is we put around 100 plants in here.
100,
over 100. So we basically dug a hole and popped a plant in there, and then we put a yellow flag with it so we know that there's something planted there. Because for example here, if there wasn't a yellow flag there, I would totally mow over this thing. But there's actually something planted. And then here you could see an example of a root that was too big to remove, but we'll have to come back with a tractor or something to pull this out and remove it. So this is where eventually a greenhouse will be, hopefully one day in the future. But for now, we just have these structures here to tell us like kind of the size of it. But yeah, this was definitely one of the bigger projects that's still kind of on its way. But
and your dad helped out.
And my dad helped. My dad came over for a couple weeks, and we actually got a lot of the hole digging done, which is, you know, it can't really be a one-person job. So having some extra help is really good. So thanks, Dad. Thanks for helping out. Yeah, so then the result is that we have all these interesting trees that are on their way. So as we are still working on this area, you know, the trees got a head start, and they hopefully will grow up to, you know, bigger size, so they don't need so much care anymore. They can just kind of survive on their own. This area, like, you could see that we started to just make little paths here. And the idea is that in the future we might have, you know, opportunity here for camping or just staying here with a little RV or whatever. There's just little spots in here that have like road access and have like a really nice view. So yeah, that's the update on the Interstitial Garden. And as you can see, there's just tons of little flags, meaning that all of these are, I think this area you came back and planted even more, because there used to be all these trees here that we had to chip.
Yeah, I dug all these holes actually here, and this is all dogwoods.
This is all dogwoods and who knows. So this is additional to the amount of trees that we've planted. And this will become a really interesting area with lots of like smaller growing trees that have all kinds of colors and shapes. So one challenge was that we had quite a dry summer, and once we planted all these trees, they needed water. So we actually got so many hoses that we were able to run a hose all the way from the house down to the end of this lawn and basically water everything. So now that it has rained a lot more, we don't need it anymore, but oh, it's still working. It's not attached to anything. How's that? So that was one challenge. And then we also made some fences around some of the trees, because even though we have this deer fence installed, I believe one deer made it in with their 2 young and just kind of lived here in this fence for a while. And since we're so busy building, we didn't really have time to really chase them out. So even though the deer fence is not 100% bulletproof, we still had like less deer pressure than usual. So what we did is we just took some old fencing, just made a structure like this, and then very important, you got to secure it to the ground with some pins, because otherwise this thing will just blow away in the wind, or a deer would just come and knock it over. One other project is our driveway, which is starting to really get gouged out by the rain. You can see how deep of a groove this has here. And we were planning on fixing that this year, but we still have quite a bunch of projects that need to get done, like big tractors and trucks that need to come in here. And I kind of want to just have the old road take that beating. And then once all the big equipment is done, then we'll put a nice road in. So this might happen next year. All right, now we get to the barn where I'm building a workshop just to be able to build stuff for the property. Another thing you can see here is that we've accumulated quite a pile of trash. And I've kind of tried to sort most of this. So this hunk of shit here in the middle is all metal, and we'll bring that to the scrap. And then there's wood and stuff over there, and more like drywall here. So I'm trying to keep it separate so we can deal with it individually. And this is the entrance to the future workshop here. Let me open up the big barn door. Chris is showing up. This is the Ark of Noah.
You mean Noah's Ark?
No, yeah, that's what I mean. This is a friend of ours that was looking for a space to build their tiny house in, and I actually just saw him pull up, so he might be working on something in here. So
they're doing electrical today.
That's great, because soon they're gonna have spray foam put in the walls and in the ceiling, I believe. So they need to get the electric in before that happens. And yeah, talking about electric, they just finished putting electric in this barn, or in this workshop here. So this is gonna be the workshop. And as you can see, all the electric is in. All the outlets are here. Lights and everything is put up. And yeah, so this is a big step that needs to be completed, because it's kind of annoying that like we have everything going on at the same time, but on the other side, it's like quite beneficial because there's just overlapping things and different priorities. And this, for example, needs to get done because then we can build cabinets for the Meadow House. And then I can also build other things like the windowsills and some of the trim for the outside of the windows there. So the idea is to get this shop up and running. Now that the electric is in, what we can do is we can put insulation in here, and then eventually this drywall will go on the walls. And then I have to put heating in here, and I have to hook up the bathroom in here. And then this should be a great workspace that's insulated, And the big reason why so many of these things are happening at the same time is because each project requires something that needs to get done before the winter arrives. And just for the buildings, that makes that. Hey, Chris. So yeah, stay tuned for a future episode because we're doing an episode on this tiny house build as well, so you'll be able to see that in more detail. But yeah, coming back to the building, it's like, the reason why we're doing windows and the siding there is because that needs to get done before the winter, because otherwise we're just gonna take a huge hit with that. So, and then this needs to get done because it allows us to make a lot of stuff for the other structures. And then this pressure tank here is gonna have water in it to pressurize this barn and the Meadow House. So this needs to be insulated as well for the winter so it doesn't freeze. And there's just tricky things in here. We can't really turn this on because there's this water pipe here that is really close to the wall, and in the winter that would totally freeze. So I gotta really beef up the insulation on that side to protect this from freezing. So yeah, this is the update. I put windows in here and doors, and here's some of the lights.
Common house windows are gonna go, right?
Yes, so the windows from the from the big house up there, they're gonna go in here. So I recently framed these windows. Well, I framed these windows when I was framing this shop, but then I took a second look and I kind of realized that, I wanted to make some changes. So there was this really big window in here, but then I realized that would go underneath this awning, and then the door would also open and slam into the window. And then it also wouldn't be center on this area, this sink here. So I decided to just pop a smaller window in here and just, make some changes. I also have a little window in here in the bathroom, so you can look at the Meadow House from here. And then one other thing I started to realize is that some of these larger 5x5 windows were actually made of smaller windows combined. So we have this window that opens that's really thin and wide. So up here, since the ceilings are so high, to get some of the eastern light, the morning light, I put a window up there, which allows me to still have a lot of space on the wall for tools and all kinds of stuff, but then I do have light coming in. And then once I put this window in, I realized that the window that was in there was in the wrong spot. It was too far over to the left. So now I aligned these windows like this. So now I can also have a workbench here, but that workbench has a view. Now most of the window and door openings are gonna be in this wall, because then I don't have to worry about, weather hitting it, like rain and snow just beating on it. And all the areas that are gonna have windows and doors are gonna have an overhang, so that will keep everything protected. It just lasts way longer that way. So yeah, this is kind of how I thought about the workshop. I have a layout in mind, but I'm sure all that is gonna change. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of get all the drywall up, have an empty space, and just start working in here. And as I start working in here, I'll figure out along the way what I need to change or what it requires. So yeah, that's an update on the workshop. And then we get to a project that we started in February, and that is the Meadow House. And again, we're trying to get everything ready for the winter, so there's still some work that needs to be done on the inside, and everything is kind of really going slow, but it's going at a steady pace. We got the toilet outside indicating that we are renovating this. And yeah, the biggest chunk of work that got done, I think, is the siding. It took quite a while to get that all worked out, and there's still some parts that need to be done. But so what I did is I put the whole house in 3D in this CAD program, Fusion 360, and then I figured out all the spacing for the boards so that most of the windows are going to be center on the board and batten. So when you look here at the front, it's all lined up. There's always a board in the middle of the window and the door on this side. And then we're trying to do that here as well. And then same for the chimney, have 4 boards across it. And then this window is also centered, but Like instead of having one board in the middle, it's gonna be two boards like that, because that's just how it kind of worked out. So yeah, the siding is on here. There's still some details that need to be taken care of, but for the majority, this should be ready for winter. And yeah, that's where we are with the Meadow House. We'll make another video on more details on that one.
All right, so you'll see this beautiful landscaping that we did on this side of the Meadow House. Okay, I'm just kidding. This is actually just completely overgrown. In the beginning of the year, I had cut this down. I've actually walked through here with a wonderful gentleman by the name of Kenton, and he actually does rock gardens. And when I had cut this back earlier in the year, we could actually see the shape of it. So the idea of this is to actually have a rock garden over here, but I don't think that we're actually going to be getting to it this year. However, we started to intersperse and dot some trees and shrubs in this area. We will need to mow the lawn again soon because we will be putting bulbs in here in the fall. But the biggest landscaping that we did, and we'll do another detailed episode on this, is actually on this side. We started to shape the bed, edge the bed, really take out a lot of the weeds. I piled on the mulch in this area, which I typically wouldn't do, but I knew we were so busy with the renovations and the landscaping up towards the common house that I just wanted to pile as much of the mulch as possible just to dampen down the weeds. So it's a little bit of a holdover. It's very lumpy. It's not exactly how I would like it, but like I said, it's just a holdover for right now, just in the ability to be able to start planting in it. And you'll see that we had our friend Steve come in and we had some drainage issue areas, and we actually have a drainage pipe now that goes down to the little stream by the road. And we'll start planting this up even more. And again, future episode. And if you look over here, you'll start to see some of the meadow. It's probably not looking its best right now, but really in the beginning of the year when the grasses were nice and purple and some of the flowers were in bloom, it looked quite nice. And I'm debating now whether we should actually cut it in the fall or try to wait until spring. But I would like to actually leave some of the meadow up throughout the winter because I think that's going to be useful for some of our pollinators who overwinter and some of the stems, and then also some of the birds for seeds. But a lot of this stuff we did not plant. It just came up on its own, despite the fact that we did quite a bit of work in this area, taking out a lot of the invasives and whatnot. But you see, we'll have some goldenrod in there. We have some black-eyed Susans that are still coming up. Actually, that's been flowering for quite some time. And then we also have some sunflowers in the distance. But I expect that it's not really until year 3 when you actually see a lot of the stuff that you planted come up. So some of the things that have come up this year, very surprising, but they're annual sunflowers. The lupin, like I said, came up but didn't flower this year, it just put out some leaves. So I think hopefully more of the stuff that we planted will come up, but maybe that's in year 2 or year 3. So yeah, so this is called wild annual sunflower, and it's one of the ones that we definitely planted in it. You see it, it's come up. But we expected some of those annuals, like our poppies and these sunflowers, to actually come up. The black-eyed Susans also. And this area is less populated by the Daucus carota, which is the wild carrot. But I can imagine that some of the seeds that we planted, the echinacea, all that type of stuff, I did plant a lot of echinacea here. So that stuff I probably won't see until like year 3. And this is not even year 1 yet. So again, just have to be patient. But this is some of the progress with the meadow.
Thanks for taking the time to see where we've landed with our progress updates. We're quickly approaching our 2-year anniversary on the homestead here at Flock, so we'll touch back again to see where we've landed by that time. If you appreciate the time we take to put together these videos, then consider supporting the channel by liking, subscribing, hitting the notifications bell, and even tipping. We also commit 10% of our Google AdSense revenue back to the Finger Lakes community, which is matched by our partners over at Espoma Organic. So your support really does go a long way, and we thank you for that. See you in the next video.